Hello everyone and welcome to our Michelangelo Master Study tutorial. Today we're going to start with making a small maquette-sized master study of Michelangelo's young slave. Everything needs to play along with the logic of the centerline that we've established. Even though the bottom of the ribcage on one side is buried in the flesh of the belly and not really visible on the surface, I still want to make sure that the figure is logical, and therefore I make sure the visible bottom of the ribcage on the right side leaves us with a plausible bottom of the ribcage on the left side. Essentially making sure that the bottom of the ribcage on the left side is not stuffed deeply inside our pelvis. Stuff like this maintains a figure that's plausible. If the hidden part of the ribcage ended up deep inside the pelvis, for example, that would be a dead giveaway to us that something was placed poorly and we needed to reconsider what we have up there. So far, we're looking good though, which I'm happy about. Balancing all of these features so that things function can be tricky. Here, we're working with a photo reference of a sculpture that doesn't move, of course, which means it's somewhat easy to keep track of these things. The hard part that we're facing here is the fact that we have limited reference and limited angles, and we're working from flat photographs, which we can't really walk around to understand the volumes, and therefore potentially missing some important components of the structure. It's easy to overlook something when we can't do as deep an investigation as we would have liked to. Partially this is because I didn't go to the academia to take reference photos myself. I just found a bunch online, which of course I could have because I live in Florence after all, so I feel a little bit stupid for not doing so. When working from life, the model is going to move, so that creates its own set of challenges, of course, even though you can walk around the model. When the model moves, the logic of the figure changes, and when decisions about the structure of the figure are taken at different points in time, it's likely that they will be taken from different positions as well. This is why knowledge about the structure of the body and how it functions is so important, so that we can control them and make sure we don't make something that's unlikely or implausible to ever occur. We have to cross-reference what our model presents us with what we know about the structure of the human body and how those structures should function and be put together. Now we're going to start working from the side view, where we do have some reference that we can use. The first order of business that we need from the side view is the C7 vertebra. It's located across from the PON at an angle, so it's easy enough to find, even though we don't really have it in our reference. We can sort of infer where it is. The C7 becomes the ending point of the contour of the back, the beginning of this contour being the bottom of the box, of course. Sculpting is very difficult, so we always tell our students to find points to work in between. Locating bony landmarks and then building contours in between them guarantees that those contours are more right than wrong from the get-go most of the time. At least they'll be starting in the right place and ending more or less in the right place, and this makes them tremendously much easier to make and work with. Once we know where a contour starts and ends, we can also very easily break that contour down into components and therefore define its look. It can sometimes be hard to impress upon our students the importance of contour. Notice here the nice value changes throughout the abdomen as we increase the value of this reference photo. These value changes are all results of the direction the contour takes from the side view. Don't confuse something that should be simple for being something complex. In order to create this effect, we must have contours from the side that allow for this effect to happen from the front. It's common to think that your work lacks volume and that's why the work looks flat and boring. Remember that in more cases than not, it's the contours that are poorly drawn, and you'll get a little extra action in the values for free if you fix your contours. You'll get a little bit more punch and action to your sculpture. Sometimes the issue is volume, sure, but more often than not, it's going to be contours that should be dealt with first. Contours that are either misplaced or poorly drawn. Try to get as much for free as possible. Try to get as much for cheap or cheaply and easily as possible. The centerline is meant to represent the spine, which means it needs to be the same in the front and in the back. It's common to have the centerline misplaced on either the front or the back and running into problems because of this. A good trick is to let your tool extend above the top of the figure before there is a head there and checking if the center line lines up in the front and in the back. Not only must they end across from each other, they need to be at the same angle inside the ribcage, of course, and the pelvis as well. And ideally the two center lines should change direction and bend more or less at the same height on either side of the figure as well, though this can be a little bit more difficult to figure out. But if we've done our work well, they should be doing this by default because they can't do anything else. If they start and end directly across from each other at the top and the bottom of the torso of the figure, they should be forced to bend more or less at the same height as well. The contours travel up and down the body and are essentially the outline of the body from any given view, and I choose to observe these contours from 4 views. You could choose a number of views, of course, depending on pose as well, but using 4 is a nice middle ground that helps keep things simple and not overly complex. The contours from the 4 views are going to be the front, the back, and the 2 sides, and the front, where I start, is going to be based off of the front plane of the box. This is going to be enough to create a figure with volume that's convincing, believe it or not. The idea that sculpture needs to be worked in the round is a little overblown and relies on having reference of every single 360-degree angle. I would say that for most people this is going to be too much and too complex, and you should focus more on drawing from 4 views, and if you do so you'll have a much greater chance at creating a successful work with a high degree of realism and respect to the reference. The contours are meant to describe the outline of the body, and in doing so, it would be helpful if some subtle movement in them helped us to do so. While having the contours move directly up and down the figure is a decent starting point if you're struggling with drawing, and perhaps what many of you should be doing in the beginning, the moment you're capable of drawing a set of contours accurately, you should begin to consider drawing said contours out with the movement in space as well. There are some simple guidelines to follow here that work really well that I can share with you. The contours for the thighs, for example, should start right below the aces point on our box and travel down to the leg on the top of the knee. Typical mistakes that gets made here is that the contour of the thigh starts too far up on the box itself or too far in, and this tends to leave us with a thigh that has an awkward sense of volume later on. This contour also has a gentle curve outwards as it travels down to the knee and before it sort of curves inwards. And again, this is going to help in turning the volume of the thigh in a convincing fashion later. The contours are, after all, the high points of volume, and thus by placing them well, the volume has a chance to exist and succeed below the contours. I do try to keep a sense of balance to everything as new stuff is added. I don't want massive thighs and skinny calves, for example. Too much of a discrepancy in size is going to throw me off and make making decisions a little bit more difficult than they need to be. Working with less volume than we're going to end up with is going to increase our ability to stay flexible. Since we're working with one view in mind at a time, a lack of volume should not be a problem. Meaning a lack of volume only really appears to be a problem when we circle the work, which we'll do eventually, but not while getting the figure blocked in. We don't want everything up in the air as a consideration at the same time. Volume is currently not a consideration, so we've left that ball on the ground, and it makes it easier to focus on the things that are going to have the largest impact on the work first. What's going to have the largest impact on the work? That's drawing, of course. When blocking in the head here, we're following the same rules as was outlined above in terms of less volume. The head in the beginning has no volume and is sculpted like a flat pancake. Its position is determined carefully from both the front and the side. Its size is determined by comparing the height of the head to something on the body that we've already established. One truth leads to another truth, which is the same concept we've applied throughout this entire process from the beginning to end. To start the head, I determine the placement of the ear hole compared to what's below it that we've established, usually the PON. From there, I find the distance from PON to the ear hole by comparing it to something else. So that something else, of course, being something below it, usually the length of the sternum. Now I'll have the place where the head is meant to start, where the jaw starts, and from here I'll decide on a tilt from the front and place the other ear hole at the same depth as the first one and at 90 degrees to the center line of the head, which determines the tilt, of course. And then I draw that tilt on as the center line. If the head is aiming off center, then I make sure that I pay close attention to where the front plane of the head is and position the ear holes accordingly so that they are directly across from each other, parallel to the front plane of the head, and perpendicular, 90 degrees perpendicular to the center line. Have a good think before beginning to sculpt and see if you can dissect and understand what it is that you're going to sculpt before even beginning to add clay. You'll find that in doing so, the discoveries that are made in the clay begin to go a lot deeper, beyond surface level, beyond what is the shape of this form versus the shape of that form, or what is the contour, how many sections of lines is this contour made up of, for example. This is when your work is really going to start taking off, and I think experience is what is going to get us there. With more experience, we're all going to be able to think and understand what we are going to sculpt and how we're going to sculpt it before even starting to sculpt. And the only way to get experience is, of course, to get out there and sculpt. That's it for this month's video. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you learned a thing or two that you can take with you into your own practice. Please let me know what you thought about the video in the comments below. I'd love to hear some feedback. Until next time, stay creative.